there has been a response from the Adani Group and their supporters that this is an attack on India and the India story. Do you really believe this is an argument that should be made? Does this argument hold any water?
It's a very unhealthy argument, right? Because it basically says you can't bring up. I mean, I believe the India story, but it has seams and weak links.
Mm-hmm.
You know what the Adani Group does? It shines light on those weakest links. In fact, the way I describe the Adani Group is not a con, but it's a company that essentially has taken advantage of the weakest links in the Indian story and run with it. I think this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to say, look, this is a company, it's clearly, kind of pushed the limits of these weaknesses. And we want the India story to be a story that plays out over the next decade. We need to start working on fixing these weaknesses. Mm-hmm. Like what? I think family group companies are there's some, not all of them. Some of them are run by very professionally. They're run as if, and there's some good things that come with family group companies. But there are family group companies in India that are obsessed with control. Everything the company does is about control, more control. And I think that's going to slow India down. You cannot have that be the driver of the economy. On markets, I mean, one thing that's always troubled me about the Sensex and the kind of psychology around Indian stock markets is if you're a bull, you can make up stuff and everybody goes along. You're a hero. I mean, look at how many Indian bulls we've celebrated through the ages, right? From Rakesh Jhunjhunwala to anybody who talks markets up, even if there's absolutely no fundamental behind it, we celebrate. If anybody brings up anything bearish about stocks, I mean, that's almost considered to be, you can't do that. I think we need to allow people to be open about companies that need to be questioned. We need to have markets where we don't treat people who are bearish as somehow bad people who need to be pushed out of the game. They have a role to play as well. And on the regulatory institutional bank side, I think we need to kind of push against inertia and indifference. We need to push for regulators who take the best actions they can given the information they have, and when they make mistakes, you don't drag them in front of Parliament and accuse them of every ulterior motive, because they are going to make mistakes. The nature of regulation, when you're doing it well, is sometimes you're going to screw up, and you got to accept that that is part of the cost of having a regulatory system that's dynamic.
My final question, Professor Damodaran, and this really is the elephant in the room. Could the Adani Group have grown in the exponential manner it has over the last decade without its political connections, networks, especially to the Modi government? And do you believe this in itself needs to be investigated as part of some joint parliamentary committee or parliament, or at least some kind of oversight over how does one company seem to get so many projects?
What are they going to investigate? Of course we know there's a connection. Of course connections pay off in infrastructure. But here's the reason I think you can't get very far. Nobody wants to be in the infrastructure business. I mean, I come to India only once every 6 months or once every year, and we all know that India's biggest, weakest link is its infrastructure. I flew into Chennai airport that stayed under construction for a decade, and even after it was constructed, you had no idea what the construction was leading to or where it was going. The Adanis have entered a business where nobody wants to be. So if you tell me there are 15 people bidding for these airports and somehow, this was a bad bid was picked, I'd like to see the evidence. I don't think it's likely. This is a business where there are very few competent players in India. And one of the tragedies that I see coming out of this is you might take a player I think there's a pathway. I don't even know why the Adanis went public, to be quite honest. I think they could have stayed private. Clearly they do something right in the infrastructure business. But I think this is what happens. An ambition and control kind of come together and you tend to overreach. So you can have I am not a great believer that parliamentary investigations lead anywhere, because politics means you dig in your heels. You basically, your side is right, the other side is wrong. They cast more noise than light on the process. So I'm sure there will be an investigation. It's not in your control or my control. There'll be a group of people. These will be, congressmen who have no idea what questions they're asking about infrastructure, and they will be given answers that they don't quite understand. And each of them will get up and make a speech on their own based on their side of the zip. But I think that you really don't need an investigation. Of course, they had political connections. Did it play a role in how quickly they grow? Absolutely. We all know it. We knew it before the Hindenburg report came out. Mm-hmm. So this has never been a secret. So what's the investigation going to prove? Unless there's something that was underhanded that happened, and I think that's worth exploring, it is what it is.